a PM doesn't have to go and like reinvent the wheel every time they're on a game team or a new product is launching. You just have to really understand, or do your best to understand the audience that you're building for, understand the games that have already been in that space, that have done things the right way, and then be able to kind of advocate for the inclusion of those features in your game.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Craft Podcast. Today, our guest is Eoin O'Leary, who is a senior product manager in the gaming space, currently at Amazon, and has worked at EA and Activision. How are you doing tonight, Eoin?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So tell us about what is your craft?
Okay, so I would say, if we had to describe it in one word, it would be monetization. That's what game PMs are considered kind of responsible for delivering. How do you take this game, which might be super fun, and make sure that it can be a business, right? What's the point in making like a really fun game if it can't make enough money to support the team to continue developing it and making it accessible to players? So I think monetization is kind of the overall goal of the PM in the gaming space. But then day to day, there's a million and one other things that a PM could be doing. But yeah.
Great. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because I know that in even different platforms for gaming, console, PC, mobile, VR, or there are also different like types of titles in all these different companies. There's no like perfect alignment. So there's like product managers, there's dev managers, there's technical program managers, there's producers. I guess the main similarities or difference. Can you tell us the difference between, let's say, like a product manager versus a game producer?
Yeah. Okay. So there's very well defined kind of job families in the gaming space. The producer is a very clearly defined role because it's been in the gaming space forever. Before free to play, you would make a game, you would put a price on it, and then you would market it and you would sell it, and kind of that was job done. And obviously the producer had a huge role in that, managing these teams of engineers and designers and artists, and making this project come together, in the build up to this big launch. But then as soon as free to play showed up on the scene, and you had to give the product away for free and then monetize after the fact, that's when PM started popping up in the gaming space. So yeah, and that was probably around 2011, 2012 when it first emerged.
No, I actually never heard that history, and that makes perfect sense to me. You've also talked a little bit about, what you've described is what you've told me as something called like the modern product manager in games. And then you told me about this triangle about the different roles, even for this modern product manager. Can you talk about this triangle, or however you would describe it?
Yeah, well, it's not like super defined, but you kind of notice it. Like you come across PMs and they have, different backgrounds or different, areas that they're particularly strong in. And you kind of tend to see, there's maybe one type that's like super focused on monetization, but like really in the weeds, like a system designer who can balance this super complex virtual economy using simulations and things like that. And that person might have a background in economics. And then you have kind of more generalist PMs, maybe operating more as like a project manager, coordinating events during live service and things like that. And then you've got people that are kind of more coming from like the analyst background, maybe a data analyst or a business analyst, focusing more on the data side. But yeah, there's kind of like the skill set that the PM has, and And then there's also like the stage of the project, right? Like you're doing very different things in pre-production that you are during middle of development, and then when the game is finally launched. So yeah, depending on project stage, you're also doing kind of different things.
I want to ask a lot of questions about systems design and also just monetization. But before we get into that, I think it's a good segue into what's your background and how did you end up here?
Yeah. So I got my start in games in Spain actually. When I was studying there, I was kind of doing a general business degree, business and languages, and I did an internship in Activision. Kind of, it was this weird time before games were all about digital downloads, and all the sales were done through the channel, and I was basically like a sales analyst, gathering all these reports from the different retailers every week, turning them into formats that we could analyze and then use to then drive more sales into the channel, right? Well, does this person need more or less units, things like that.
Cool. And then, your background is essentially, we use the three examples you gave. You started off as an analyst, and then you went into PM. Okay, cool. Let's talk about systems design. One of our former guests, he used the word system. He used the phrase systems design a lot, and he worked in esports. And I was very surprised that he spoke about that topic. So can I kind of give us a quick overview of what does system design mean in gaming, and maybe even like one example of a system?
Yeah. So games are a combination of features. There's like the moment to moment where you're playing the game, and you could be fighting, or you could be, I don't know, driving a car, and this is the thing that you're doing kind of to really have a lot of fun as you play. But then there's all these kind of systems around it that kind of give meaning to what you're doing. And it's like, well, why am I fighting right now? Or why is this race so important? Because there's a prize that you want to earn, right? And then all these kind of like connected features, they have to make sense, and they have to be kind of like the juice has to be worth the squeeze, right? So how do you build all these supporting systems that make you really want to chase this item for like 100 hours so that the thing that you get is actually meaningful? So yeah, that's kind of one way to approach system design. It's to think about like time, the unit of time for the player, how long it takes to earn something, and then maybe even what's the dollar value or the gem value for what they've just earned. And then you kind of balance their time versus the virtual currency versus real world currency. So yeah, that's kind of how I think
That's
of it.
no, it's such a hot topic, frankly, in a controversial space right now, which is like Web3 games, because everyone all of a sudden is like, hey, I want to hire someone who knows how to do design an economy, an in-game economy, which I believe just falls under the bucket of like systems design, correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, let's talk about
I could say one more thing
yeah,
on. I think that
please.
like the NFT space is, or ownership within games is kind of like a hot topic right now, and there's tons of companies going out there, building these NFTs, and some of them are like they're very exciting, and then you have these other people that are saying, well, actually, like where's the value to the player? Like, does this really make sense, or who's asking for this? And I'll just say that, like, from what I've seen over the years in games, when you have a gaming community or a place where people want to spend tons of time, and they're acquiring all these assets and they're making their characters stronger, that time investment creates value. And then you see people selling their accounts for like thousands of dollars and things like that. So there's already this huge amount of value being created inside the gaming ecosystem. So I think these tools that are going to allow gamers to take ownership is, it's only going to be a good thing.
That is such a good point. I think, frankly, this is the best way I've heard it being described in a positive manner. Another thing I've heard a lot about is there's a partner at Benchmark Capital. He was actually one of the original investors in Riot. I forgot his name. He's super famous. And he said, what's funny about the gaming community is that gaming is kind of always, on a kind of, I would say, cutting edge of technology, and that involves like new like business models too. And he said that gamers initially were against like all the different monetization products in gaming, but they ended up like adopting it. Whether they love it or not, they're definitely used to it by now. Okay, so let's talk about monetization. What is monetization an extension of system design? Like as you said, right? Like, okay, well, if you're going to invest this many hours, then is this thing meaningful? And then, what's the dollar amount of this to make it meaningful? Like, what's the framework of how you think about monetization?
Yeah, I think the market is very mature, right? It's been around for a long time. There's loads of like, really good games out there, established best practices. So, a PM doesn't have to go and like reinvent the wheel every time they're on a game team or a new product is launching. You just have to really understand, or do your best to understand the audience that you're building for, um, understand the games that have already been in that space, that have done things the right way, and then be able to kind of advocate for the inclusion of those features in your game, and then understand based on the other components that are in your game, well, how does this integrate? How does this make sense? What am I working with here? How many characters do I have? What type of moment-to-moment gameplay do we have? What version of all these kind of puzzle pieces makes sense? So that's kind of how I think about monetization at this point in time.
That makes sense. Um, but what you just said, it sounds a little bit intuitive, but it also sounds kind of complex as well. So, I've been thinking a lot about this. Is there such a thing as like an entry level games PM? And if so, do they need to have some of the backgrounds you were talking about, like an analyst or maybe like a project manager? From what I've seen, primarily in PC game studios, the path typically starts off as like a production coordinator, which I would say is probably more like project management. And then they kind of decide which path they want to go down. They kind of do the game producer part, and then a few of them go into like product management as well. What's common today as a quote unquote a typical entry level mobile game PM?
Yeah, I think more and more you see MBA interns at kind of like the larger studios. So that's one path. Obviously, that's not the path that everyone takes. It's not the path that I took. There are kind of more junior roles, as you described, in like these other functions, be it production or as an analyst or in the finance department, and you can kind of work your way up and across into product management. But yeah, there's the whole other side of it is like the gaming industry is so big. You've got like something like $100 billion in being spent in mobile applications, and 2/3 of it is gaming. So $60 billion being spent in games is huge industry, and it's not all in like the top 10 companies, right? Like the top grossing charts stays pretty consistent, but it's also true that over time there's more and more companies that are making like $20 million a year, that are making $100 million a year. So there's like tons of opportunities to work in kind of these kind of small to mid-sized gaming companies, and get experience in product management, monetization, all these other areas of the gaming space.
Cool. A couple of potentially controversial topics or just areas in gaming is well, let's start off with like cloud gaming. I think everyone has heard about, or if you're in the game industry, you've heard about the Stadia situation, which if I could summarize, I think Google is still pursuing Stadia, which is their cloud gaming, I don't know what to even call it, platform or
Yeah.
service. but they've shut down their first-party game development. Many other companies are involved with cloud gaming. Amazon's got Luna, Meta has their cloud gaming stuff too. But the thing that just kind of I'm not a believer, and I'll tell you why I don't believe in it, but I'm kind of curious what you think about it.
Okay.
So the reason I don't really believe it is because I feel like a lot of the mobile platform is getting better and better, just due to more better technology, better hardware, and different games work for different platforms. So the people who are make a part of the 60 or 100 billion on mobile, they're just going to continue to evolve with the industry and the hardware and whatever software capabilities that come out. I don't understand why I would want to play like a AAA PC, like desktop type game, but on mobile. Because I think that's what the allure of cloud is, right? That you have these bigger files or more complex games that wouldn't maybe fit on a phone, and now you could play in the cloud. And the second thing would be just quote unquote playing the game without having it on the cloud. I just haven't really. I know why I don't want it, but once again, we shouldn't be our, the best like guess as a customer. But I haven't seen much traction either. What do you think about this topic?
Yeah, it's no, it's cool to hear your perspective on it. I I think you raised the point about Google shutting down its like first party development. I think making games is like really hard, and I don't think that that is directly relevant to Google's efforts to do to make cloud gaming happen.
That's a good
I,
point.
I
That's a good
think
point.
I think it's fundamentally about distribution, and I think that honestly, I just think it's a matter of time. I told you, at the start of the podcast that 10 years ago, my job was trying to understand how many discs we need to make so that people in Spain have enough, FIFA, and that just doesn't exist anymore. Well, it does exist, but it's probably like 20% of the market, right? 20% of the market is still is still buying discs instead of doing digital downloads. And it took probably 10 years for it to flip, right? It was the other way. It was like 10 years ago, it was probably 80% discs, 20% digital downloads. Now it's the opposite. And I think cloud gaming is going to be the same. It's not going to come in overnight, flip a switch. It's going to be over time. There's going to be this improved distribution system. And it means that I'm not going to have to wait 2 hours for my my new Halo Infinite to download onto my Xbox, right? I'll just press a button, I'll press play, and that'll be it.
I see. Yeah, I think I've definitely approached this more from a mobile perspective, but I think I could definitely see the value if it's for like console or some like larger file.
Yeah, but also the thing about mobile is that mobile, it's very nuanced, right? In some parts of the world, the mobile phone is the primary gaming device.
Right.
Like China, Southeast Asia, that's where people play games. So cloud gaming there could have a big impact on mobile, but you wouldn't necessarily expect to see the same dependency on or the same impact on phones in the US, because people like to play on their TVs and enjoy on their sofa. But I still think that the distribution will move towards streaming and cloud gaming at some point.
I'm convinced. I think my thinking was really limited towards mobile in the sense of I could just download the game. It takes like 10 seconds. Why does it matter if I, wait longer and could play directly without downloading the file? But and the other thought I always had was, okay, well maybe it's not for the mobile games. Maybe it's to download like a PC game. But then it's like, why would I want to play a PC game on mobile? Usually they have to change it due to the surface size. But I think I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I think you're right. Awesome. Well, just one more final question for me, which is a lot of people listen to this podcast because they're interested in learning more about a specific path. In this case, it's games PM. Any recommendation you have for people who are looking for a career switch, or just maybe just like like they just graduated college or high school and they're looking to break in? Like, how does one break in?
Yeah, like it's tough. It's a tough space to break into because, small teams, very, oftentimes very profitable businesses. So there's obviously a lot of interest. I think, one way to do it, can be to start early. Pick your path. If you're interested in, analytics, try and do an internship in the game space. If you're doing business, try and do an internship in the game space. Um, if you're, if you're further on in your career, I would say there are roles in game teams that require less specific game knowledge, that might, be ways to get your foot in the door. So kind of like development management, when you're kind of more focused on, managing, team capacity, scheduling, things like that. And, once you're in a game team, you can start to, learn more about the specifics of, game features and things like that if you want to get into product management. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that was helpful.
No, definitely. I think what's interesting is I think gaming is such a big industry. Game PM, I think, probably is one of the most interesting roles because you're kind of touching a bit of everything. You kind of have to know a little bit of everything, and monetization is just so important for any product, really. So it's like you're like the nerve center of the product, which is the game. So I love just like interviewing people and learning about even different like platforms. I want to like interview like a VR game PM next. I have no idea what that's like. So definitely appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, John. It was fun chatting.